Guys, I think I've done it. I think I figured out the number one reason most men and women are finding it impossible to be in a healthy relationship these days. And it is so under talked about, it's crazy. Are there like 100 contributing factors driving the gender war and the resulting loneliness crisis? Yes. Many of which I've talked about on this channel. But there's a glaring one that's been flying under the radar for some time that I have been slowly analyzing and unpacking. And I think the reason we're not talking about it is because no one has given it a name yet. But as soon as I dig in, I think you're going to relate to everything I've been thinking about. We are facing a main character epidemic. Hey guys, I'm Hannah Cox. Welcome to my channel where I bring you my politically homeless takes on politics and culture. If you're also politically homeless, I'd love for you to join me here by subscribing to my channel, and don't forget to hit that notification bell while you're at it so you always get alerts when I release new videos. For returning listeners, I have to do a little housekeeping. I am so sorry for my extended absence. I had been planning to take some time off for our official wedding ceremony, which we finally got around to having out in the Santa Ynez Wine Valley of California earlier last month. It was the perfect week. I posted some photos on my Instagram and on my Facebook pages for anyone that wants some behind the scenes, but we had an amazing time. And I came back so rested, so rejuvenated, so ready to dive back into my work. And then literally a day after I returned, Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Candidly, I have just not felt up to making videos ever since then. I have been processing that event and the fallout around it. I chose to take my thoughts over to Substack and write about them. That just felt like a better medium at this point in time. Personally, I'm just increasingly inclined towards using the written word to express my thoughts over videos. I've been having this pull within myself for some time. Obviously, everything in my industry is increasingly pushing to video work. There's a lot more money to be made in doing that. There's a lot more visibility. The reality is most Americans just don't read that much anymore. But I think that that is ultimately contributing to much of the partisanship, most of the misunderstandings, a lot of the hostility that we have going between us. Even in the written word, you still see people that just absolutely cannot read. And I saw that with my piece I wrote about Charlie Kirk's assassination, where I was clearly mourning his death, even though I considered him a political rival. And yet I had people accuse me of celebrating it. There's just nothing that can be done at this point in time with how many Americans are functionally illiterate. We can try to save the future generations, but this is actually where we're at the moment, and it's a huge problem. But I did notice a significant difference in discussing that sensitive subject over that medium versus here, where I do think just things like how you look, how your voice sounds, what kind of expressions you make can really skew the impression of what you're saying to many people. And I wanted to avoid that. So if you want to hear my thoughts on that whole situation, I have addressed them at my Substack. Most of them are not behind a paywall, so you can just have a free membership or a subscription and read those there. If you do want to subscribe, there's also an option where you get some additional content as well. Anyways, I have been slowly dipping my toe back into the water when it comes to video work. I have a huge guest booked for later this month that I am so excited to bring you, so stay tuned for that. For audio listeners, I am going to be posting the Hannah Cox Show exclusively on YouTube, Facebook, and Substack audio from now on, because those are the platforms that pay their creators. It's as simple as that. I hope you'll choose to tune into shows on one of those platforms instead. This will be the last audio upload on Spotify or Apple, but if you join my Substack newsletter or hit the bell on YouTube, you will get notifications for new releases, and you can listen to YouTube videos the same as you would an audio podcast. All right, with that all being said, let's get into today's episode. So a few days ago, my husband sent me this video, and I got so excited because it used different words to touch about a phenomenon I have been observing and thinking about between men and women for some time.
My friend has this theory about dating, and it's called the rock and the star. So essentially, she thinks that if you're a rock, you have to be with a star, and two rocks can't be together and two stars can't be together, and that sometimes a rock can appear like a star, but it's actually a rock, or the other way around, like a star can appear like a rock, but it's actually a star. And honestly, I started thinking, I think all the guys want to be the stars these days, and that's why I'm looking for a rock. I can't find a rock. I want to be the star, but it feels like every guy that I meet wants to be the star, not the rock. And it's just very interesting.
Now, I am not going to refer to this issue as the rock star dilemma, although I think it's very handy imagery. I think this boils down even deeper. I do think, like I said at the top, we have a main character epidemic in this country that I want to further unpack, but this is a really good jumping off place. And it's not the only one out there. This discussion has been taking a few different shapes and forms over the past couple of months. One that I have noted and actually made content about is that women are starting to talk about their experience in dating men and realizing that a lot of them really do just want to be women. Like they are very, very jealous of women. And it's getting to a point where it's kind of giving like, I want to wear your skin and walk around.
If you woke up tomorrow as a woman, what would you do?
Go clubbing, probably.
Why would you go clubbing?
I don't know. Get free drinks, I guess, right?
If you woke up tomorrow as a woman, what would you do?
Fuck myself. I mean, I'm the baddest bitch.
If you woke up tomorrow as a woman, what would you do?
I'd probably go to a club and get some rich dudes to buy me drinks.
This particular part of the problem gets discussed a good bit, and I cannot disagree. You hear women say, men want to be us, or men are jealous of us, and I concur. A lot of younger men are very pressed that no one is whining and dining them, no one is flying them out, no one is paying their bills, no one is begging them to come sit at their tables in the club. They are just so convinced that women have life on easy mode, and they not only want in, not only do they wish that was them, but they are filled with rage towards women for having these opportunities that they don't get. Now, I think this is delusional. This is the thought process of somebody who doesn't walk around outside very often. There is definitely a lot of grass is greener mentality going on here. Both genders have pluses and minuses going for them, okay? That much should be obvious to fully functioning adults. But women have to deal with a lot more in society than men do. They have threats to their safety. They have ongoing harassment in the workplace that can very much stunt their career. They have periods, okay? Just periods alone. Like last month, I was literally crumpled up in a ball on the floor of my bathroom for like 4 hours vomiting because the cramps and pain were so significant from my period. A rank and file event that women have to deal with every single month and still go to work and still take care of their kids and still get everything done. Okay, this would be a hospitalized situation for most men. I'm convinced of it after watching how they deal with a cold. Women have to deal with that and still go about their day. So that fact alone, okay, I just cannot take this grass is greener for women mentality. It's crazy. On top of that, we have hormones, okay? Hormones suck. They're completely outside of our control, and they only get worse as you age and get into menopause. Women have to deal with pregnancy, and they have to deal with all these things while often still being expected to do most of the parenting and the housework alone. So if they do get some free dinners or drinks along the way, I still don't think the scales are like tipped in women's corner when it comes to who has life on easy mode. It is quite simply a fact that women inherently bring more to the table, which I hate that phrasing from dusty men. Ugh, it makes me want to gag. I can't stand it, but men started it, so we're going to use their terminology, okay? Women bring more to the table inherently than men do, and that is biological. Women are multipliers. It is ingrained in who they are. I love the quote from Dr. Miles Monroe that says, whatever you give a woman, she's going to multiply. If you give her sperm, she'll give you a baby. If you give her a house, she'll give you a home. If you give her groceries, she'll make you a meal. If you give her a smile, she'll give you her heart. She multiplies and enlarges what is given to her. So if you give her any crap, you will receive a ton of eloquent. So in exchange and an acknowledgement of that, because this is historically true, this is something that is ingrained in our biology, there has been a societal pact that men would find ways to bear some of the load for women. They were supposed to be strong. They were supposed to be protectors, to be providers, to fight women's battles for them out in the world, to shield them from much of the world's ills. I think somewhere along the road, it got twisted that this was like inherent in men. And I don't think that that's true. I don't think it's biologically true. I don't think that men are innately protectors. I've made a whole video on that. I think women are actually more programmed to be protectors. These were more roles that we asked men to step into to have more of a balance in the sexes. And if they didn't do it, then society would shun them. But that's broken down now. And I know that a lot of anti-women men are going to rush into my comments and say, it's because of feminism. Feminism is what took this from you. You asked for this. But it's not. That's low IQ. Feminism came about because men were already breaking this contract. If you know what I'm referring to when I say that, go ahead and take a second, weigh in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you take a second to subscribe to my channel while you're doing that, and don't forget to hit that notification bell. Now, in the before times, LOL, society's expectations for gender roles in a relationship were further backed up by the church. Most people were religious, at least they went to church pretty regularly, and this was a big part of being accepted in society as well. But I think the church actually contributed to the breakdown in the gender relationships because it was also only teaching half-truths. Now, this is a frustrating component of the gender war right now because I often hear people who are very clearly not religious trying to use this passage as an argument for pushing women into subservient roles. Number one, I, as a Christian, do not believe in using my religion to enforce laws that make people behave according to our rules. Christianity is voluntary. It's actually imperative as part of our theology that people have free will and opt into religion and its rules that they then voluntarily follow. So when you try to use the government to push people to behave as Christians would teach you to, you're already acting anti-Christian. Secondarily, as a person who believes in a limited government and also a person as a lick of common sense, I don't want religious rules in the government because I don't want to have to live under the rules of other people's religions. And I have enough common sense to recognize that when you set that precedent, as soon as your religion isn't in the majority, whatever religion is in the majority can come in and try to make you live under their cuckoo thoughts. So anybody doing that needs to cut it out. And I do think is just completely illiterate when it comes to religion and when it comes to basic constitutional law and how things work. But because this gets brought up all the time, I'm going to refer to some Christian teaching. The first part you're going to recognize. The second part you probably aren't going to. In the Bible, there is a passage in the New Testament that says, "Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands and everything." And this part got pushed very, very heavily. In fact, it was used to back up many of the laws that were in place that prevented women from having equal rights, which were anti-constitutional and anti-Christian. But the church supported this largely and continues to. But the second part of this passage is the one that you don't hear most of the grifters and hacks using Christianity to advance their views bring up. You will hear it from genuine pastors and churches. And it says, "Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her," meaning he died for her, "to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own body." Men were supposed to be servant leaders, a very specific type of leader according to this teaching, which again is only valid under Christianity. It should never be used as a way to set public policy in a country, but it was. So we're going to talk about it in light of that, and because it continues to be used by many in evangelical and conservative circles to try to reinstitute that same framework. But what men were called to do under that whole ideology, which had laws backing it up, was to put their wives and their wives' best interest ahead of their own. They were also to ensure that they were blameless. That's a pretty tall order. Men were supposed to be servant leaders to their wives, loving them like Christ loved the church, meaning being willing to die for them, being blameless for them, and laying down their lives both physically but also metaphorically in order to serve them. Instead, what happened is that we forced women to submit through unconstitutional laws without ever requiring of men their duty in that voluntary relationship dynamic. Instead, men thought they were and behaved as if they were the main character, and they expected women to operate like a sidekick in a movie. And they still think that, okay? They still think that, except the problem has only gotten worse. And they'll pretty openly say this. If you start actually having discussions with men around this, or with what they're looking for in women and why they aren't finding it, or why they don't think women are worth the trouble anymore, it all comes back to this, right? They don't want women anymore because women are equals. What they were looking for was someone who would have all of their priorities set aside and instead focused on building that man up. And this is particularly evident when you start talking to men around the criticism about many of them trying to seek much younger women. You'll actually hear them say that they think this is justified, not because they have tendencies, but because they want her to take on their interests. They want her to travel with them. They want her to hold the opinions that they hold, to be able to shape her mentally. They want her to fit into their lives. And they'll say this to you as if it's just an innocuous thing they're looking for, as if there's nothing problematic about that whatsoever. But in reality, they're not looking for partners. They're looking for an assistant. They think they are the main character in the world, and they want a woman who is going to help come make that true for them. They don't want to fit into a woman's life. They don't want to be interested in things that interest her. You'll even hear this come up when women point out like how hard it is to live with a man, right? How much more cleaning they have to do just because another person is living in the home. And men will say, well, those aren't my standards. Those are your standards. They don't think that they should have to live up to a woman's standards. They don't think they should have to do things to improve her life. They don't think they should even have to do things to ensure they aren't detracting from her life, because many of these men see women as being there to serve them. And as soon as that dynamic was taken away from them because we gave women equality, all of a sudden they weren't interested in relationships with women anymore. It's very telling. I see examples of this problem all around me, of men who are so desperate to be the main character that they ruin existing relationships or that they prevent themselves from being able to access them in the first place. It's literally happening all the time. Take the recent news this week that Nicole Kidman and her country music superstar husband, Keith Urban, are divorcing. And while we're still waiting for confirmed details, and we don't actually know exactly what went down at the moment yet, it does seem like the gossip, the news, the tea, the blind items are all pointing to one theme.
I interviewed Keith Urban about a year ago. For those who don't know, he's just split from Nicole Kidman. And when we spoke, it was very clear that the poor guy was totally sick of being asked about his much more famous wife. Up until then, he was charm personified, happily talking about music, his friendship with Taylor Swift, who supported him early in her career. But there was this one topic that raised a shield, and that was Nicole. She famously staged an intervention that saved his life from alcoholism just 4 months after their wedding, as he said in the song, "Thank You." When I brought up that intervention, he looked me in the eye and he snapped, "I just don't want to give you guys a headline about my wife," he said. He never lost his cool, but there was a deep sensitivity underneath that brush off. He knew the drill. He talks about his career, I talk about his global star wife. You know, that was the deal. It was transactional. And the brutal truth was, he was right to be sensitive. Without Nicole, I wouldn't have been there. The reason we were interviewing him was because he was married to her, and his marriage undeniably boosted his success and his sobriety. He knew he owed a part of his story to her. The last straw came at the very end of our interview. I asked if he was proud of her. One last attempt, and he said very, and then shut it down with a level of frustration that I won't forget. "We've had the best conversation," he said, "and at the very end you're going to give one more swing to see if I'll talk about my wife. I'm not going to talk about her." That snippiness wasn't about the media, it was about the burden, I think. A decent bloke struggling under the weight of a strange world where his life and his career were constantly framed by his wife. Having to acknowledge that debt over and over again, you can see how it would take its toll. Maybe the signs were there a year ago.
Now, again, most of this is speculation, but it seems to track to me. Whether or not he's having an affair with a young woman who's been touring with him or not, it does seem like he is the one who wanted out of this marriage. And by the way, leaving 2 kids in the wake of it. It does seem like she was the one who was trying to fight for it. And by all outward appearances, it does seem like she was doing a whole lot more for him throughout the course of that relationship than he was doing for her. She was far more famous than him. She was richer than him. She was prettier than him. She was more sober than him. The list goes on. And whether or not his jealousy over her status is what ultimately led to their relationship's collapse or him cheating on her, I can tell you firsthand, working in the music industry for the time period that I did, it would not be the first time. I remember working the Grammys red carpet in college when Nick Cannon was married to Mariah Carey. And it was my job to get the artist through their red carpet interviews. I didn't have him. I was in front of him with a different artist, but I overheard one of the interviewers asking him, "Where is your wife? When is she coming?" And you could tell his entire demeanor shifted. He was so mad that they were more interested in his wife showing up at the carpet versus him, that it was palpable. And it seems to me that his wife had chosen to let him walk the carpet on his own so as to not outshine him, which is very typical. Women often try to dim their lights for these kinds of men because they don't want to hurt their egos, and it's still not enough. Now, Hollywood is the definition of people trying to be the main event. And what I think makes that an interesting microcosm for this discussion is that even when you look at these people, all of whom are very talented and wealthy and getting tons of attention, this dynamic still continues to play out because it's not even about having that kind of notoriety or having that kind of success. It's about needing to have more of it than the woman standing next to you. And this is what I've observed over those years is that women, even when they are quantifiably more successful, more interesting, richer, better off, more famous than their husband, they never get egotistical about it. They typically are very willing to step aside, let their husband have his own solo moment on the carpet or getting his photo taken. They are, if anything, praising him and lifting him up. And they are never seeking to like lord it over their lesser known partner. But what I often see from those men in those circumstances is that it infuriates them rather than being like, wow, this amazing woman that I cannot believe I got, who is actually still out of my league, is propping me up and trying to help my career. No, they're furious and bitter and angry about it. And usually it leads to them divorcing or cheating in some spectacular fashion. Doesn't matter if their shows are packed out, if they have tons of adoring fans, if they've got their money up. It doesn't matter how much the woman is propping them up. It is never enough to fill that gaping hole that they have in them because they still aren't the main character in comparison to the woman, and that drives them nuts. And it's why when these men do cheat, they always cheat down. They are always looking for someone that will make them feel like the big man. Because in reality, they're not a big man. And they have to go look at bottom dwellers who are willing to have affairs with people's husbands in order to find somebody that makes them feel like they are. For many decades, society told women to put themselves second, to find their value in the roles of motherhood and in being a wife. But we never valued them in those roles. Their husbands did not provide or protect or serve them in many cases, as true leaders are called to. And so women have fought for equality, and now they have become the main characters. They're the ones moving and shaking the world. They're the graduates, they're the volunteers, they're the political organizers, they're the artists. And now that that has been awoken in them, they can't be expected to play sidekick to a man, particularly a man whose resume is nowhere near as impressive as their own. But that's what men are still asking for. That's why you hear them constantly saying women need to lower their standards. If men want to be the stars in the relationship, the main characters in life, then they're going to have to find a way to create and even surpass the value women inherently bring to the table. And if they can't do that, which would be tough because, again, they are not able to produce or multiply like women can, then what they should consider becoming is real rocks that stand in the gap for women and the future children they desire. All right, guys, I hope you like this episode. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel if you've not already. If you want to support my work and access subscriber-only perks like live events and Q&As, head on over to my Substack. You can join for only like, I don't know, $40 a year or something. And if you want content from me more regularly, head over to platforms like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or TikTok. I will see you sporadically here.